Welcome to the Best Books Podcast, an Orchard Hill Church podcast that helps you choose your next book. I'm thrilled that my guest today is the Strip District pastor, Dan Irvin. Dan, how's it going?
What's up, Jonathan? Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is your second time here,
Wow.
right?
All right. You had me back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was a good enough experience.
Nice.
Yeah, good enough for you, good enough for me.
Now, how many people get asked back?
Pretty much everyone.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it's
All right.
pretty
You,
tight.
you made it sound
gotta-
like something unique.
No, you got to
Yeah.
screw up pretty bad
Nice.
to
Okay.
not get back. But it should be an honor nonetheless, and we have a great
Yeah.
book to talk about today. We'll get into that in a second. We always like to sort of begin getting to know the guest. So today we're talking about a book, largely talking about one of the principles of the book is that we're all being formed by someone or something. So what would you say, apart from Jesus, what is something that has formed you or made a disciple out of you?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Even something that like I tie myself closely to nowadays, and this is a ridiculous example, but I'm so deep into Facebook Marketplace, probably in a bad way, Jonathan. You wouldn't believe the stuff that I think I need to buy that, because it's a good price. I'm out in someone's house in the middle of nowhere looking at this lawnmower. I have a lawnmower. Why do I need another one? But I'm real into Facebook Marketplace, buying, selling, trading.
What's the farthest you've ever gone to pick something
Oh,
up?
geez. It's embarrassing. Probably it's
Sore
been
subject.
45 minutes to an hour probably.
Yeah.
If the price is right. I've sold broken lawnmowers that, I advertise as broken, but for some reason people want to buy them.
Yeah.
It's wild.
You're in really bad shape when you're renting a vehicle just for Facebook Marketplace, and I've done that twice now, so I'm right
100%.
there with you.
Yes,
Our
good.
kitchen
All right, good to
table
know.
we got for a really good deal. It's one of those where by the time you pick it up, you bring it back, and you sort of calculate, okay,
Yeah.
how much was this U-Haul, and how much? It's like with the
Yeah.
combined money from Facebook Marketplace and U-Haul,
Yeah.
could I have just bought it?
Sure.
Somewhat new.
It's about the
but-
experience.
Yeah,
It's about the
yeah,
experience,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's about wasting 4 hours.
It is,
basically.
yeah.
So, well, cool.
Yeah.
Would you go any deeper? Is there any way that Facebook Marketplace has changed you as a person? or
Well,
does it-
I waste a lot of time there,
Okay.
and it hasn't changed me as a person, but it's definitely something that I go to when I am, I'm gonna need to waste some time or need to check out mentally for a minute to see what's going on in Facebook Marketplace. What are people selling? Or the thing I'm looking for, is there any good deals on it right now?
yeah, it's a good place to check before you go to Amazon or before you buy it new.
All the
'cause
time.
It's amazing how many people are just clearing out space, and
Yeah.
we've probably both been that person at some point. So it's like logically someone's moving somewhere. So,
Yeah, totally.
Works out. Well, like I said at the beginning, you lead our Strip District campus, so I'd love to just get a ministry update from you. What's going on at the Strip? What's
Yeah.
got you excited?
Yeah, no, we're heading into Christmas time at the Strip. We just had, a great fall season. We added an evening service in the last 7 months, a 5:00 Sunday night service, which has been a cool launch at the Strip. A lot of new people jumping into that service, people I meet every week that, funny enough, they'll say, I found Orchard Hill because I did a chat GPT search of 5:00 Sunday night services, or so people are finding the church that way that are looking specifically for a 5:00 Sunday night service or an evening service. So that's been exciting, and then I'm just excited about potential at Christmas Eve, and people that are coming checking out church for the first time. It's always a cool thing.
For sure. Feel free to take this in any direction. I just thought of it. What would you say is your greatest need from a human resource perspective? Like if you could have 10 more of blank, 10 more of this certain kind of person. Maybe it's a kid's been volunteer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's someone who's greeting. Is there anything that comes to mind? Or
Yeah, good question. No, it's definitely kids volunteers are, seems like the hardest volunteer to find, someone who's not even necessarily has experience with kids, but someone that just has a heart for working with kids, can be willing to be trained, willing to get the clearances, willing to kind of go through the steps to get on board. And then if we had some more space for kids too, I know it's not a human volunteer, but or a human resource, but finding space we're busting at the seams most weekends in Kidsburg with with room to grow.
Kids
which
are
is why we added
naturally interested in construction. They
Yeah.
have like the fire trucks. Well, that's not really, but construction equipment and stuff. Maybe you could just kind of slowly teach them how to
not a bad idea.
knock down some walls.
We could knock down walls. The problem is we don't have very anywhere to go in the strip. We're kind of landlocked.
Yeah, exactly.
We could go up, I guess, build up. We've thought about that, but
sure.
it's a good problem to have though, because we just had infant baptism dedication last weekend. It's so fun seeing all the new families and young families kind of growing up in the church and bringing their relatives along to experience church. So it's a fun weekend.
Praise God. Well, unfortunately, I think you're the only church leader in the world that's ever struggled to find kids volunteers. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I know. Who could I talk to about this?
No, fortunately, I think that's pretty universal. And we trust that God will provide that over time. So
for sure.
Well, today we're talking about a really interesting book. We're talking about the book Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. Dan, you're going to be impressed. I did some research. So this book was winner of ECPA's Christian Book of the Year award.
Oh,
I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but it was also a New York Times bestseller, which I think we can all agree is impressive. It was originally published, actually just last year, January of 2024. So we're getting in on the ground floor in the content game of reviewing this. So Dan, why did you choose this book?
I had previously read one of the author's other books, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And this was probably back during 2020, kind of COVID-ish time. And it had an impact on me in the way that I was living my life. I think I was in ministry. I wasn't working at the church at the time, but in ministry and just feeling a little run down, a little tired, a little like, man, I'm spinning my wheels. And COVID, forced all of us to slow down in a lot of ways. And I think got a hold of this book at just that time too, and it kind of just grabbed my heart in a way where I was willing to hear it, to listen, to understand that I was probably running at a pace that wasn't necessary, that wasn't that I was hurrying in a way that was not helpful for me, for my family, for ministry, for longevity, and that book really helped me. And I recommend that one too. And so it kind of led me towards discovering this author a little bit, and I forget who turned me on to this new book being out, but picked it up and read this maybe a year and a half ago. My wife actually led a study group at our house of college girls last year going through this book, so she's actually the expert. She should be on the podcast.
Right.
But so we've talked about it a little bit together too, and so it's been a formative book in the last year and a half. Some good ideas in it.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything from, now that you've sort of been exposed to both of the books, was there any overlap, you think, or are there two completely different ideas?
Yeah, a lot of similar ideas. As with most authors, I feel like you get a tone, a theme that they like to run with. But I think one of the reoccurring things was a focus on, and we'll get into this, being with Jesus, a presence that is undeniable, a peace that comes from knowing him, from being with him, from slowing down enough in your own life, in your own hurry to notice him and notice the ways that he's working and notice the ways that he's trying to direct your life, speak into your life. So that's probably a big enough constant theme that I've seen in both of those books.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And from your perspective, why, let's just get really basic, why is it called Practicing the Way?
Yeah, he talks about that early in the book. He talks about in the book of Acts how the earliest Christians weren't called Christians. They were called followers of the way, the way of, following Jesus, being an apprentice to Jesus. And he talks about, this word practicing, and he, as this, as you practice anything, you're pursuing a level of, understanding. It's a climb, it's a build. So I think those two words, he wanted people to understand that it's, life with Jesus, being a Christian it's a practice, it's a gradual understanding, a learning, and the way, it's the way of Jesus. Yeah.
How do you think that's different from the way we typically approach things? Because it's one of those things where I think it is. Yeah. It's hard to really, I even found this reading the book. I found I was having a hard time figuring out, are these just different words that he's using, or are these different categories? Because I think there's a difference there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think there is a lot of common language that he uses in the book that, maybe it's just another way of saying something or spinning something. But yeah, I think the interesting thing about picking the word practice is it's so common to all of us. We we grow up and we practice things in school, and we practice instruments, we practice our crafts, our sports, whatever it is, to achieve a certain level. And it's a little different, I think, in Christianity too, and following Christ, because we're not necessarily trying to achieve a certain we're higher above someone else who's just beginning to practice the way. We're all on a journey together in practicing the way. So
we're not going from being amateur Christians to professional Christians in the same way.
And some have practiced longer than others, but it doesn't mean you learn this from coaches growing up. You can practice something the wrong way for a long time, and it can lead to results that are not good, right? So if we practice in the right ways, which I think he gets into a lot in this book, it can lead to fruit, and it can lead to the growth that I think we all probably want in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's this dynamic that if you've been around church long enough, in a church, even a church like Orchard Hill, we talk all the time about the difference between a church like ours and a more traditional church would be the difference in do versus done, right? That's like a language we use. The gospel is the good news that Jesus has already done. He's already accomplished what religion sort of seeks out to do. And yet I think this is, it's a pushback, and yet it's not, because I think the pushback from this author would be to say, well, there are still things to do, right? Even though we would identify that to be a Christian is for the largest thing to be done, our salvation is accomplished, that is not then to say that the Christian life is just to sort of sit around until we meet Jesus. And so I think it's the challenge that I need sometimes, because I think I can get a little bit too far down that track of, okay, what really even is the Christian life, right? If it is already done. And so that's the tension of sort of living in that.
You can slip down an easy path, and he gets into this in the book of legalism, of doing things to earn a status, to try to earn God's favor, his love. And so it's that fine line of realizing that the work has been done by Jesus, but he's called us to something, and he talks about being saved to something, saved to a life of the way that is different than how others might live or think about life.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a few themes in the book. I'll just list a few of them. Becoming like Jesus, being versus doing. It's something we've been talking about. Apprenticeship to Jesus, spiritual formation, the practices of Jesus, and the pace of life. Did any theme, it doesn't have to be one of those I just referenced, but did any theme stick out to you as you were reading?
Yeah, I think being versus doing was obviously something I've considered before, but this idea that being with Jesus, and you think about the disciples, even as they were with Jesus, their lives started to change. Like the things that were important to them, they left their families, they left their professions, they went to places probably that they never thought, regions that they never thought they would be willing to go, just because they were with Jesus. It's a constant emphasis on, and they were with Jesus. They traveled with Jesus. They saw what he did. The crowds were amazed, and the disciples as well. So I think it's that this idea of being with Jesus will eventually lead to your life changing, this natural overflow of your life being different because you've been with the apprentice, the one who is modeling life, the written down moments in the Gospels, and then the moments where it's just the in-between, and they're having these side conversations as they travel, or there's jokes being told, like even things like that we don't get to read a whole lot, I think, in the pages of Scripture, but were happening because Jesus was a human as much as he was God. So, that concept of being leads to doing, and being versus doing was an important one for me.
Yeah, I liked how he talked about one of the building blocks of modern psychology being, I think the more research that we've been able to do, it sort of affirms what the Bible says, and that we love because he first loved us is really the most simple way I can put it. But just the fact that we will never be people of love until we've received that love from Jesus. And so just like you're saying, the being with him inevitably should have results to it.
Yeah.
he really breaks these into three, what I would call mega chapters. I think that's a very simple structure and it's very helpful. A lot of the times, even if an author has 3 points, they'll divide each point into 3 or 4 chapters. It can be kind of hard to understand what he's arguing, but I like how he breaks these into 3 chapters. So he talks about being with Jesus, part 2, becoming like him, and part 3, doing as he did. So it's fair to say, we were talking about being versus doing. Was it that first chapter that really gripped your attention as you think about this?
Yeah, that chapter locked me in. Got me excited. I think for about because it's on the front cover of the book, kind of the 3 points that he's trying to drive home.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that got me excited. Got me thinking about again, like I was saying, he talks about. At one point in the book, a person that he knew that just exuded the peace of Christ. It was a spiritual director in his life that every time he was with this person, he left those meetings not really remembering, what he talked about or what was shared, but he just remembered leaving at peace. And because this person's demeanor was so calm, was so peaceful, you could tell he had been with Jesus. I years ago worked with a person like that at a camp property, and all these things flying around the camp, 1,000,000 miles an hour, thousands of kids rolling through, and you got stuff to do all the time. It's always busy, and his stuff will go wrong from time to time at these camps, but his mentality was and I was young, I was in my early 20s, and he would come alongside me, and I remember and say like, hey, I know that didn't go the way you planned, but is God still who he says he is? Is the sun going to come up tomorrow? You just have those moments with him where he'd be like, it's going to be okay. Like, this isn't the first time things have gone bad in someone's life, or things have not gone according to plan, or you said something you didn't want to say. Like, there's a peace and a calmness about him that I just so desire to be around him, because something was uniquely different about the way he approached trial than the way that I was approaching it. And he gets at this idea, I think, in that first part of the book too.
Yeah, and what a model for us to shoot for. It's. I think you're right in that there's an attractiveness to that, to where you spend time with someone like that, and yeah, you don't necessarily remember everything they said, but you remember the vibe.
Yeah.
You remember the just the feeling that they gave you, and yeah, it's something I liked that he put forward pretty early in the book is that it is aspirational, but that it is possible. You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes it is so easy to be suffering oriented and to be negative about, man, I have so far to go.
Yeah.
And yet I liked how he brought about, he didn't focus so much on the beginning as toward the end, to these people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, who were sages in his mind. And but I liked that he's coming at this from more of a middle-aged perspective. Like, I think it would come off a little like he didn't know what he was talking about if he was maybe my age in writing this. It's like,
Sure.
well, these are all things that I believe will happen, but so he's had enough life experience that these things are happening in his life. He's been in ministry for about 20 years, I think the book said, and yet he knows a lot of people who are further along the road than him. And so I think just aspirational for me, and just that positive view of, hey, this is possible. God is still working in your life.
Yeah, that was important too.
Yeah. So he talks a lot about this idea of spiritual formation. What do you think that means? If you could just unpack that for us.
Yeah, no, it's a word that if you've been around church for a little bit, you've probably heard it. You've probably heard people talk about it. To be spiritual in today's context can mean so many different things, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm not a religious person, but I'm spiritual, or I don't go to church, but I'm spiritual. But in this context, and the context that we're talking about today in this book too, I think about a process of becoming a person, the kind of person that lives in the way that Jesus lived. Pretty simply put, but it's an ongoing process, a practice of becoming more like Jesus, being formed into the likeness of Jesus.
Yeah, definitely. I have pulled up Galatians 4:19. Paul writes, "My dear children, from whom I am again in the pains of childbirth, until Christ is formed in you." And it's funny because in context, it's kind of a negative thing. He's saying like, hey, I'm in the process of childbirth. Like, you're making this harder than it needs to be. And yet there is that positive of to be in ministry is to what a joy and what a privilege it is to be used to help Christ be formed in someone. And I think the cool thing about that is you don't have to be in full-time ministry for that to be true of you. You know, you can be anytime you God has called you to minister to someone, whether that just be someone in your small group who you're speaking truth to. This is something that we all get to engage in. So I found that to be a theme that it's consistently lacking in my life. You know, I think sometimes it can be, especially working in ministry, I think that can sort of fall to the wayside. But I think just the positive view of, hey, if I focus on this, then everything will just kind of take care of itself. It's kind of like what you're saying with the camp example. It's like, it's not to say that the other things in ministry aren't important. Like, I'm sure the things that we're anxious about are important, and that's why we're anxious about them. And yet to have that peace of mind to know that, to trust in God's hand, even when things are sort of falling apart around us. So which of this book talked a lot about sort of moving from faith to theory to practice. So what does that look like? What does it look like for someone to not just read this book, but to actually put these things into practice?
Yeah. I think for me, it's meant a couple of different things, and I like how you've been saying it too. It's like this idea that I think we first have to get to a place where we realize that it's possible to live a different way, to be a different way, because I think we can get stuck in, I've always struggled with this.
This will never get better.
Yeah, how will this get better? How will this change? You know, I've tried a way and it didn't work. And I think pretty recently in my journey, I've been brought back to this idea that it is a constant pursuit, a reworking of the plan. Like, it's okay if the plan changes. If you have this is how I'm going to grow. These are the things I'm going to do. And he lists a bunch of things in the book, spiritual disciplines or formation practices, whatever you want to call them. And I look at that list sometimes. I'm like, I don't know how many I really do well. But I don't think it's about all of them happening in unison, in sync at the same time. I think it's about having an attainable plan. He talks about this rule of life in the book, and having this kind of measurable plan in place where you can say, like, okay, here are the things that I'm going to start with. I'm going to start here, because if you're starting at 0, you can't try to go to 99 or 100, in a day or two. You have to start at 0 and think, okay, by the end of the week, how do I get to 5, 10%, whatever it is for you. And the other thing I think about too is just in moving from faith to theory to practice is the people that I'm with, and surrounding myself with people that are different than me. And that may sound like a bad idea at first, or like, well, wouldn't you want to surround yourself with people that are also trying to follow the way? And yes, we do. As Christians, we should. But I think it's also important for me to remember what it's like to be on the other side of the door. Mm-hmm. If life, with Jesus is you've opened the door, you've accepted his invitation, and you've walked in, there are people that are on the other side of the door that don't even know the invitation exists, that don't even realize that this kind of life is available to them. And so I think and especially in church ministry, the danger can be you're only around people that are involved in church or willing to even come to church. And there's a world that is so far disconnected from that I want to put myself in places where I'm around those types of people, whether it's my neighborhood or, different events at my, kids' school or things like that, where I can be around people that have different views than I do. That's healthy for me to realize that that the way that Jesus offers is truly the way that I want to live my life and point others towards too.
Yeah, I love that connection, because I think for some of us, we hear these things about developing an inner life, and it feels empty to the degree of, if you've grown up in any sort of church that pushes evangelism, you have this just natural nagging in the back of your mind. What about unbelieving people? Mm-hmm. And I think one reason I really like what he's promoting is that it actually gives us something to push unbelievers toward. Whereas sometimes I think if we are just constantly pushing evangelism, but we are neglecting the inner life, neglecting what really is these practices, these spiritual practices, if we're not growing as a disciple of Jesus, sometimes it can just feel like sales, right? We're just pushing people to make a decision and to say yes to something. Whereas when Jesus is someone you are personally walking with and walking behind, he is ministering to you in your deepest need. He is rejoicing with you when you need to rejoice, and he is weeping with you when you need to weep. That is a Jesus that is attractive enough to share. And so I think we when we have that sort of inner life with Jesus, it actually has this inside out effect where it actually promotes Jesus to other people. And we say, okay, well, now I actually have something to sell, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that it's all sales. You know what I mean? Like a salesman who is passionate about a product is always going to be more effective than even a great salesman who has something he doesn't believe in.
Yeah. And I think with that too, there's a kind of, putting your money where your mouth is type of reality when you're forced to be in a situation that's uncomfortable, or you're with people that have a different viewpoint than you, and your faith is, as much as your faith can grow in the quiet moments, in the places where you're being, with Jesus, there's the doing, there's the, actually showing up in a community that maybe you're not welcome. Maybe you're not, they're not super excited that there's a church group there's a pastor that shows up, or there's a, and those are the moments where you have to, I think, rely on Jesus and come back to him, because you don't have anywhere else to go. Like, you wouldn't be doing this for any other reason other than the fact that God has changed your life and you want other people to know about him too. So those are the, kind of drop to your knees moments and say, okay, God, I need you now in this moment, because I'm at the end of what I can do. Those are for me, have been the growth moments in life where it's been like, okay, without God showing up here, I'm dead. I'm dead in the water,
Right. Yeah, and he talks through that of just how that's the moment of where most people have a point of growth in their spiritual formation, where sometimes we think of the really difficult things, we question, why would God bring this my way? And sometimes 10 years down the road, we see that, that was actually a big moment for me. That was ironically the means by which God was making me the kind of person he wanted me to be all along. Super encouraging stuff. Well, unfortunately, we're coming up on our time, but just thinking through Orchard Hill, our groups are a big part of our strategy. We really love to get people in the groups because we really believe in the power of not just hearing a message on Sundays, but to get in a circle with others, to be able to think through how to apply this specifically to our lives. So what would it look like to apply these practices in a group mentality? Like what about a group what would a group need to, I guess, embrace to embrace these things?
Yeah, no, I think to think about the way in which you can know someone well enough in your group to know, did you think about one of the practices that you've never tried before, and can we apply that this week? Can we just do that together? We've never fasted, we rarely, can we try that together? Can we unpack that and seek wisdom and how to do that well? And I think in community, and he again talks about this in the book, and community is one of the practices he talks about, like, how do we live life, together and follow Jesus? Part of the way is living this Christian life with other people, letting people behind the curtain, so to speak. I mean, not everyone's going to be your best friend. Not everyone's going to know the ins and outs, the highest highs and the lowest lows in your life. But we have to have a few people that do, and we have to have a larger group of people that I think are connected with us in a way that they know also kind of what's going on and where it gets hard. And we need that encouragement to know that we're not the only ones that will struggle and that have struggled. And we also need the encouragement of, this is going good for this person. I never thought it would. And look at that. Like, that's a victory when we can see that in people.
Yeah. One thing I like that he talked about with community is bringing things into the light. Just the simplicity of, we don't have the power to change things, but we do have the power to bring things into the light, and then to watch God as he changes things. And so I just love that positive vision. One thing I've been thinking about lately in the groups that I manage is that phrase that you hear all the time, bear one another's burden. But how do we bear one another's burdens if we don't even know what those burdens are? And so for a lot of groups, I think that's just a good starting point, just a good X-ray sort of question. Is my group the kind where I am bringing a version of myself, or am I bringing myself? Am I bringing an honest, I guess, version of myself? Well, this is a super helpful book. I think I speak for both of us when I say I think this is a good challenge and just a good book to get into people's hands just to practice the way. So we've been talking to Dan Irvin about the book Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. We really hope you have enjoyed our conversation. If you like this episode, be sure to share it with someone that you think would enjoy it. This is going to help us get all the Orchard Hill Plus resources into people's hands, and this will help us in our goal of helping people find and follow Jesus Christ. Please join us next time as we continue to highlight books that will help us all practice the way and walk in our spiritual lives. Until then, I'm Jonathan Thiede, and this has been Best Books.